In August of 2024, while working through a new collection of historical photographs, Dr. Sarah Lieberman came across an image that would change everything. She was digitizing old photos for the United States Holocaust Memorial Museum, something she had done countless times before. But this one picture, taken in 1945 at the Bergen-Belsen concentration camp, stood out in a way no other had. It showed a little girl, maybe 6 years old, sitting on a simple cot in a children's recovery ward. She held a doll in her arms, one that had clearly been donated, and she looked into the camera with the faintest hesitant smile. It was a heartbreaking image, one of many captured in the aftermath of the camp's liberation. The file had been labeled Unidentified Child Survivor, May 1945. For nearly 80 years, that's all anyone knew, but something in the photo caught Dr. Lieberman's eye. Using the museum's high-resolution scanner, she digitized the image at 6,400 dpi. As she examined the fine details, she zoomed in on the girl's left hand. That's when she saw it. Numbers, faint but unmistakable, tattooed into the skin of her tiny forearm. The number was A7358. Dr. Lieberman's breath caught. She recognized what that meant immediately. That number wasn't random. It was an Auschwitz tattoo. Specifically, the A series was issued in mid-1944, and children bearing such tattoos were extremely rare. Most children sent to Auschwitz were killed upon arrival. The few who were tattooed had been chosen for forced labor, subjected to medical experiments, or spared for reasons that often remain unknown. A child this young with an Auschwitz tattoo, still alive in May 1945, meant she had survived something almost beyond belief. Sarah had worked at the museum for over a decade, specializing in identifying survivors through photographs. Each year, her team processed about 500 new images sent from families, found in archives, or acquired through estate donations. In this case, the photo came from a large collection, 847 images, donated by the family of Captain James Walsh, a U.S. Army medical officer who had helped liberate Bergen-Belsen. Captain Walsh passed away in 2023 at the age of 102. His estate included personal papers and photographs from his time in service. One photo, labeled in his handwriting as Little Girl with Doll, Children's Ward, May 12, 1945, showed the young girl in the oversized dress. Her hair had been cut short, likely shaved due to lice, and was starting to grow back unevenly. The doll in her lap was almost her size. Her face was cautious, trying to smile. Sarah had seen thousands of such photos. They never got easier. Each one marked the beginning of a long, uncertain journey of recovery. But this photo was different. It held a clue. When Sarah searched the museum's database using the tattoo number A7358, she found a match. Female prisoner. Registered May 28, 1944. No name. No further records. The Nazis had destroyed many records before the camps were liberated, leaving gaps that have never been filled. For many survivors, their only proof of having been there was a number inked into their skin. But this time, there was a photo to go with that number. A moment captured shortly after liberation, a real face behind the digits. And now, perhaps, a chance to give that face a name. Sarah launched a full investigation. She wanted to know who this girl was, what had happened to her, and whether her story had continued beyond that hospital ward. Had she been reunited with family? Was she taken in by a survivors' organization? Could she still be alive today? There was only one way to find out. And so, the search to uncover the identity of A7358 had begun. But that was just the beginning. She started with the facts. The child's Auschwitz number was A7358. Female, registered on May 28, 1944. Judging by her appearance in the photo, she looked about 6 years old, likely born in 1938 or 1939. The photograph had been taken at Bergen-Belsen on May 12, 1945, in the British-controlled zone. She was small, with a thin build and light brown hair. Next, Dr. Lieberman focused on the historical context. The series of Auschwitz numbers had been assigned to a specific group, Hungarian Jews who arrived at the camp during one of the most intense phases of the Holocaust between May and July 1944. In just a few months, roughly 440,000 Hungarian Jews were deported to Auschwitz. Most were killed on arrival. Those who were kept alive were registered, tattooed, and selected for forced labor. But that almost never included young children. They were usually sent straight to the gas chambers. The only exceptions were extremely rare. Twins chosen for medical experiments, older children who lied about their age, or those protected by relatives. So for a 6-year-old child to have been tattooed and to survive, that meant she had endured something nearly unimaginable. Sarah began reaching out to organizations that might help her fill in the gaps. First was the Archival Archives in Germany, an international center for research on Nazi persecution. They confirmed the registration of prisoner A7358 on May 28, 1944, but there was no name, no transport record, and no information about liberation. Next, she turned to Yad Vashem in Israel. Their records showed that a transport had arrived at Auschwitz from Munkacs, Hungary, on that very day, May 28, 1944. It had carried about 3,000 people. Of those, 2,847 were killed immediately. Only 153 were tattooed and registered, and among them were around a dozen children under the age of 10. That was an unusually high number for children being selected to live. Then she checked with the Bergen-Belsen Memorial Archives. Their liberation records documented around 500 children under 12 who were found alive when British troops arrived on April 15, 1945. Many were in critical condition. Even with medical care, a large number did not survive the following weeks. Efforts were made to identify survivors, but many of the children were too young, too ill, or too traumatized to give their names. Sarah also contacted several Jewish organizations that had helped survivors find family after the war. She dug into records of children placed in orphanages, foster homes, and displaced persons camps. And then, finally, a breakthrough. After 3 weeks of intense searching, she came across a handwritten list in the Bergen-Belsen Archives. It was titled Children's Ward, Unidentified, May 1945. Entry number 47 described a female child, about 6 years old. Tattoo number A7358. No name. Spoke Hungarian. Nonverbal. Unresponsive to questions. She had been placed under the care of UNRRA, the United Nations Relief and Rehabilitation Administration. In June 1945, UNRRA had taken responsibility for thousands of displaced children. Sarah followed that lead and contacted their successor organizations to access archive records. Then, in September 2024, she found what she was looking for. It was a transfer document dated June 18, 1945. The record confirmed that child A7358, still unnamed, had been moved to a Jewish children's home in Paris. She was accompanied by a volunteer nurse, Eva Kleen, herself a survivor. The document included a short note. Child exhibits severe trauma, does not speak, requires ongoing medical care and psychological support. Now, Sarah had a location, a time frame, and a new direction. She contacted the organization that had operated the children's home in Paris after the war. The facility had housed around 400 Holocaust survivor children between 1945 and 1952, many of whom had lost their entire families. They had kept their records. And they had a name. Can you imagine that moment? After all the fragments and gaps, after months of tracing a number across decades, now, finally, there was a name to match the face in the photo. A piece of history was about to become whole. On September 15, 2024, Sarah reached out to the archivist managing the intake records from the Jewish children's home in Paris. That same day, she received an email that made her pause. Attached were scanned documents from 1945, including the intake form for a 6-year-old girl named Hannah Goldberg. According to the file, Hannah had come from Munkacs, Hungary. She was registered at Auschwitz as prisoner A7358 and had been liberated from Bergen-Belsen in May 1945. She had no known surviving relatives. The intake notes were brief but heartbreaking. Severely malnourished, suffering from tuberculosis, unable to speak, with a tattoo on her left forearm. She was placed directly into the medical ward. Now, finally, Sarah had a name, But there was more. The file included progress notes from the months after Hannah's arrival. In July 1945, she remained silent. She responded to her name, but was fearful of adults, though she accepted comfort from female caregivers. By September, something changed. She began to speak again, in Hungarian. She asked over and over for Anya, her mother. Nightmares were frequent. She needed constant attention. In December 1945, her health began to stabilize. She was still undergoing treatment for tuberculosis, but her condition was improving. Mentally and emotionally, though, the trauma ran deep. One caregiver, Eva Kleen, emerged in the notes again and again. Hannah had formed a strong bond with her. By March 1946, Hannah was starting to play with other children, though anxiety was still a major struggle. One detail stood out. She refused to part with her doll, the same one seen in the 1945 photograph. She carried it everywhere. That doll had become more than a toy. It was her anchor, a link to the moment of liberation, maybe the first gift she ever received after the camps. Records showed she held on to it for years. So what happened to Hannah after that? Sarah kept digging. Between 1946 and 1948, Hannah remained at the children's home in Paris. Eva Kleen, the nurse who had brought her from Bergen-Belsen, became her primary caregiver. Then, in 1948, Eva formally adopted her. Eva herself was a Holocaust survivor from Poland. She had lived through Auschwitz and, after the war, dedicated her life to helping children who had no one left. In 1949, Eva and Hannah moved to the United States. They settled in New York City. Through the 1950s and 1960s, records became harder to find. But Sarah discovered school enrollment forms showing that Hannah attended public school in the city. Eva never remarried. She focused entirely on raising Hannah, who graduated high school and started her adult life. In 1970, Sarah found a marriage certificate. Hannah Goldberg married David Rosenberg in New York. By the late 1970s, they had 3 children, Rebecca, Sarah, and Jacob. And then in 1985, Sarah uncovered something extraordinary. A local Jewish community newspaper had published an article featuring Hannah Goldberg Rosenberg. She had shared her story at a Holocaust remembrance event. The piece quoted her directly. "I was 6 years old when I was liberated from Bergen-Belsen. I don't remember my parents' faces. I don't remember our home in Hungary. I remember the camps. I remember hunger. I remember fear. But I also remember the day I was given a doll, the first toy I'd had in over a year. That doll meant hope, kindness, the possibility that the world could be good again. I kept that doll all my life. I showed it to my children. I told them, this is what hope looks like." It was a powerful moment. Sarah sat with those words, knowing that the photograph she had scanned, the one that started this whole journey, was part of the story Hannah had carried for a lifetime. Now came the next step. Was Hannah still alive? Sarah began searching public databases, recent obituaries, and family history records. Eventually, she found what she was looking for. Hannah Goldberg Rosenberg had lived in New York until 2018. That year, she moved to a retirement community in Florida. In 2024, she was 84 years old. She was still alive, but now Sarah faced a delicate question. Should she reach out? Contacting Holocaust survivors about their past wasn't something to take lightly. Many had spent decades trying to move forward, building families, healing, living with strength and dignity. For some, being reminded of the trauma could be painful, even overwhelming. But others wanted their stories remembered. They wanted people to know what happened, not just to them, but to the millions who never got the chance to speak. Sarah made her decision. She would reach out, but with care. She contacted a Holocaust Survivor Services organization in Florida. She explained what she had found and asked if they would act as an intermediary, someone trusted who could approach Hannah gently and see whether she would be open to hearing from a museum. Sarah didn't know what would happen next, but she had come this far. And the story of A7358, Hannah Goldberg, wasn't finished yet. In October 2024, a social worker from the Holocaust Survivor Services organization sat down with Hannah Goldberg Rosenberg in her retirement community. The visit was quiet and respectful. The social worker explained that a researcher had come across a photograph from 1945, one that appeared to show Hannah shortly after the liberation of Bergen-Belsen. But they would only share it if she was comfortable. Hannah thought for a moment, then she said yes. On October 15, 2024, Sarah Lieberman flew to Florida. She met Hannah in a bright, quiet community room at her residence. Hannah's daughter, Rebecca, came along to support her mother. Hannah was petite, with a sharp gaze and snow-white hair. She walked slowly, using a cane. On her left forearm, the faded numbers A7358 were still visible. Sarah brought the photo on a tablet. She spoke softly. "Mrs. Rosenberg," she said, "this picture was taken in May 1945, not long after Bergen-Belsen was liberated. It shows a little girl holding a doll. We believe that little girl is you." She turned the screen so Hannah could see. Hannah looked closely. Her daughter gently took her hand. For a few long seconds, Hannah said nothing. Then, in a quiet voice, she spoke. "That's me," she said. "That's the doll." Tears welled in her eyes. "I haven't seen a picture of myself from that time in 79 years, she said. "There were no cameras in the camps. My family didn't have a camera. I've had nothing from that part of my life except my memories, the tattoo, and the doll." Sarah leaned forward. "Do you still have it? The doll?" Hannah nodded slowly. "Come with me." They walked together to Hannah's apartment. She opened a closet and reached for a carefully wrapped box on the top shelf. Inside, surrounded by tissue paper, lay the same porcelain doll from the photo, nearly 80 years old. Its paint was faded, the dress yellow with age, but it was whole. "I've kept her all my life," Hannah said softly. "I named her Hope. When I had nightmares, I held hope. When I was scared, I held hope. And when I had children of my own, I told them her story, that she was given to me when I had lost everything, that she represented the kindness still left in the world, even after everything I had seen." She looked again at the photograph. "That little girl had survived hell," she said. "She didn't know if safety even existed anymore. But someone gave her a doll. Someone showed her kindness. And that kindness, it saved her life as much as the medicine did." The identification of Hannah Goldberg Rosenberg as the girl in the photograph closed a 79-year mystery. But more than that, it brought new light to a story of survival, resilience, and hope. Over the next few months, Sarah and Hannah worked together to record her full story. Hannah had been born in February 1939 in Munkacs, a town that's now part of Ukraine. Her father, Jacob Goldberg, was a tailor. Her mother, Miriam, was a seamstress. She had an older brother, David, who was 8 years old in 1944. Their extended family, grandparents, aunts, uncles, cousins, totaled about 35 people. In May 1944, the Goldberg family was forced into the Munkacs ghetto along with approximately 14,000 other Jews. On May 23rd, they were deported to Auschwitz. They arrived 5 days later. During the selection process, 5-year-old Hannah was separated from her mother. No one knows why. It could have been a mistake. Or maybe at the last moment, an SS officer made a decision without explanation. Instead of being sent to the gas chambers, Hannah was tattooed and placed in the children's barracks. Her family, her parents, brother, and nearly all her relatives, were murdered within hours. From June 1944 through January 1945, Hannah remained in Auschwitz. Her survival came down to chance, the quiet protection of older inmates, and her small size, which sometimes helped her go unnoticed. She was occasionally used in medical procedures, non-lethal, but deeply traumatic, experiments that tested the limits of pain or measured how long children could go without food. It's amazing she survived it all, and yet she did, and that was just part of her story. In January 1945, as Soviet troops advanced toward Auschwitz, the Nazis began evacuating the camps. Prisoners were forced westward in brutal winter marches. Hannah was among them. She survived the transfer to Bergen-Belsen, a journey that claimed countless lives. And for 4 more months, she endured the terrible conditions there, disease, starvation, and chaos. Then, on April 15, 1945, British soldiers arrived and liberated the camp. Hannah was found in the children's section, barely conscious, fighting off typhus and extreme malnutrition. She was taken to a British military hospital unit on site, where recovery was slow and uncertain. But she survived. On May 12, 1945, just 2 weeks before what would have been her 6th birthday, a photograph was taken. In it, she sits quietly on a cot, holding the porcelain doll that had just been given to her. At the time, she didn't know the date. She didn't even know her birthday anymore. After all she had been through, time had lost its meaning. But that image became a turning point. The United States Holocaust Memorial Museum later added Hannah's full story to their permanent collection. That once anonymous photograph is now part of an exhibition called Faces Found, identifying the unknown survivors. It marks one life reclaimed from the silence of history. Hannah agreed to record a video testimony for the museum's archive. At 84 years old, she shared what she could, memories that were broken and painful, but also deeply meaningful. For most of my life, she said, I was just a number, a 7358. The Nazis tried to take away my name, my identity, my humanity. They tattooed me like property, to say I was less than human. But I survived. I got my name back. I built a life. I had children. I had grandchildren. The number is still on my arm, but it doesn't define me. She paused, then looked at the photo. That picture from 1945 shows something important. It's the moment I stopped being just a number. The moment I started becoming Hannah again. It was a shift from victim to survivor, from emptiness to receiving something. A doll, just a doll. But to me, it meant everything. It was hope. It was proof that kindness still existed, that humanity still existed. I want people to look at that photo and remember every person in the Holocaust had a name, a family, a story. We were not just numbers. And those of us who survived, we carry the duty to speak, so the world never forgets. She also made one final gesture. Hannah donated the doll, Hope, to the museum. Today, it sits in a glass case beside the photograph, under a small placard that reads, This doll was given to Hannah Goldberg, Auschwitz prisoner A7358, after her liberation from Bergen-Belsen in May 1945. She kept it for 79 years as a symbol of hope and humanity's capacity for kindness, even in the darkest times. And the story didn't end there. By 2024, Hannah had 3 children, 8 grandchildren, and 5 great-grandchildren. Her family, an entire living legacy, had grown to over 30 people. All of them descended from one little girl who survived Auschwitz. At a family gathering in November 2024, one of Hannah's great-granddaughters, also 6 years old, picked up the photo and studied it. Is that you, great-grandma? She asked. Yes, Hannah said. You look sad. I was very sad then, she replied gently. But do you see the doll? That doll gave me hope. And hope helped me live long enough to become your great-grandmother. The little girl looked closely at the picture again. Can I see your number? Hannah rolled up her sleeve, revealing the faded ink on her left arm, A7358. The child reached out and touched the numbers with care. Does it hurt? Not anymore, Hannah said softly. It used to hurt every day. But now it's just a reminder that I survived. Hannah's story is more than a tale of survival. It's a reminder what it means to endure, to rebuild, and to remember. A single photograph, long forgotten, brought her past into focus and gave the world a chance to see the human face behind the number A7358. It connected generations, inspired reflection, and proved that even in history's darkest moments, something as simple as a doll could carry the weight of hope. What began as an ordinary archival project became a bridge across time, linking a 6-year-old girl in a post-war hospital ward to the great-granddaughter who now holds her picture. Through Hannah's courage and the efforts of those who worked to uncover her story, we're reminded that history is not made of numbers and statistics, but of people with names, voices, and memories. And now, thanks to one photograph, a doll named Hope, and a survivor willing to speak, Hannah's legacy will live on, not just in museums and records, but in hearts. So when you see that photograph, remember what it stands for, Not just survival, but kindness. Not just history, but humanity. And above all, the power of remembering. Let me know in the comments, what part of Hannah's story stayed with you most?